The holiday season is upon us, and so is week 13 of the NFL season. Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my week 13 NFL predictions. And last week was my worst week in a while. 7-6 on the week. Overall for the season, I am 117-63. However, week 12, it really played out the way I kind of anticipated it. As I talked about how there were five teams who were favored by a touchdown or more: the Chiefs, the Texans, the Lions, the Dolphins, and the Commanders. I also talked about how I did some research in the last 8 seasons of the NFL. The week before Thanksgiving, the games were surprisingly close. And I guaranteed that at least two of those five overwhelming favorites were not going to cover. The Chiefs did not cover against the Panthers. It took a game-winning field goal to get past the Panthers. The Texans were upset by the Titans. The Commanders were upset by the Cowboys. And it honestly made me wonder where this Cowboys team has been all season. The Lions and Dolphins, they both took care of business. What does week 13 have in store for us? As this is the week where the holiday season begins, 3 games on Thanksgiving Day, a game on Black Friday, the game of the week, Eagles and Ravens, the two leading rushers in the NFL going against each other. Without further ado, let's get to the week 13 NFL predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. The first of 3 Thanksgiving Day games, Bears and Lions. The Lions are 10-1 on the season, first place in the NFC. However, they have lost 8 in a row on Thanksgiving Day, and they face off against a Bears team who has shown potential in the last 2 weeks, but they have just fallen short of getting the victory. And Caleb Williams arguably played his best game in the NFL yet, considering the circumstances. I know statistically he did not. However, given the fact that he did what he did against a Vikings defense that has given quarterbacks all season fits and frustrations, Caleb Williams did pretty well. And the Lions are currently favored by 10.5 points. So you're looking for the Lions to win by 11. With what I have seen from the Bears in the last 2 games, I really do think there is some value in taking the Bears to cover the 10.5 points. Considering the fact the Lions, they have not won a Thanksgiving Day game in 8 years. This Lions team this season, it is different. It's different than any Lions team that we have seen. And I do think the Lions get the win. However, I do not know if they're going to necessarily cover the 10.5 points. With what the Bears have done the last couple of games, it's been morale victories, and maybe they get another one here. But either way, I am going to pick the Lions to win on Thanksgiving for the first time in 8 years. The second of 3 Thanksgiving Day games, Giants-Cowboys. We saw this matchup early on in the season, and the Cowboys, it was supposed to be a get-right game for them, as going into it, they had 2 bad losses in a row at home, but then they went on the road against the Giants, and it was a game where they only did just enough to win that game. Last week, the Cowboys got an upset victory over the Commanders on the road. Very emotional victory for the Cowboys going into this game. While the Giants, they announced Tommy DeVito will be the starting quarterback moving forward. They demoted Daniel Jones to quarterback 4. Then they granted his release. And the Giants, they played their worst game of the season, arguably, against the Buccaneers. And this is a game where I simply have to pick somebody to win this game because that is the deal when you predict NFL games. You have to predict every single one. So I am going to go with the Cowboys because at least they have some confidence going into this game, despite the Cowboys being the only team in all of the major professional sports to not have a win at home this season. I do think they finally get it in a matchup where we're going to see Tommy DeVito versus Cooper Rush. And I think it will just be like the matchup earlier in the season in MetLife, where the Cowboys will do just enough to win the game. I will be surprised if this game is a high scoring game. I think it's going to take probably maybe 17 points to win this game, maybe even less than that. The third and final Thanksgiving Day game, Dolphins and Packers. And there is no doubt that of the three Thanksgiving Day games, this is the best one. The Dolphins, they are on a 3-game winning streak, and it's looking like they have things figured out. They have confidence going into this game on the road in Lambeau against the Packers Thanksgiving night. However, the projected temperature at the time of kickoff is 27 degrees. In the Dolphins franchise history, they are 3-7 all time when the temperatures are 23 degrees or below, which, lucky for the Dolphins right now, it's slated to be 27 degrees. However, Tua Tagovailoa, he is 0-7 when it's 40 degrees or below in his career. And that, honestly, to me, it feels self-explanatory to pick the Dolphins to win this game, despite being confident. The Packers, they are also a confident team going into this game, as they had a dominant win over the 49ers. Despite the 49ers' injuries, the Packers, they defeated the team who ended their season last year. And that is a major confidence booster for this Packers team. And I'm going to go with the Packers, as everything just feels like it is on the Packers side going into this game. And Tyreek Hill is also questionable for this game for the Dolphins. We did see Jalen Waddle have his best game of the season last week, but I think the Packers, they do win this game, as Tua has shown time and time again that he cannot win cold weather games. Raiders and Chiefs on Black Friday. We saw this matchup in week 8, and the Chiefs won by a score of 27-20. And the Chiefs are currently favored by 13.5 points. For the Raiders, Gardner Minshew is out for the season, and Desmond Ridder is slated to be the quarterback in this game. The Raiders are now essentially down to their third-string quarterback this season, while the Chiefs, they survived and advanced last week against the Panthers, a game-winning field goal as time expired. And one thing I will say about this matchup, the Chiefs are going to win. There's no doubt about it, even though we did see the Raiders take down the Chiefs last season on Christmas Day in Arrowhead. I just don't think it happens this season. And the question is, will the Chiefs cover? Because last week I mentioned that the Chiefs, they have had a hard time covering all season. And for them to cover, you need them to win by 14. And they have not won by 14 points or more all season long. The Chiefs, they've just been a team that in almost all of their games, they've just been finding ways to win, and I get that. That's what championship teams do. But for those of you that care about the spreads, I don't know if I can trust the Chiefs to cover in a game until I can see that they can do that, which they've had a hard time doing it. The Chiefs win, no doubt about it. But if there was a week for them to finally cover, it would be this week, given what the Raiders are down to at quarterback in Desmond Ridder. Chargers and Falcons. The Chargers, they look to respond after a loss to the Ravens on Monday Night Football in a matchup between the Harbaughs, while the Falcons, they are off their bye week, and the bye week could not have been at a more perfect time for the Falcons, as they entered the bye week on a 2-game losing streak. The last time we saw the Falcons on the field, an abysmal performance on both sides of the ball, a 38-6 loss against the Broncos. And I really felt like the Falcons had potential 4 or 5 weeks ago if their defense could just start to improve. But the last 2 games, that has not been the case. At least for the Saints, you can at least look at the fact that special teams was an issue in that game. But the last game they played a couple weeks ago against the Broncos, no excuses there, just abysmal on both sides of the ball. And the Chargers, they are without a doubt the most improved team, in my opinion, even though they did lose last week. The Chargers, I do think that they have a bright future. I would not be surprised if we did see them win the AFC sooner rather than later. But I think the Chargers, they take care of business in this game. And I will be honest, I feel like the Chargers should be favored by more than what they're being favored by right now. As the Falcons, I feel like they cannot be trusted at this point. Every time I seem to have confidence in the Falcons, they really let me down. So I'm going to pick the Chargers in this game, as I just feel like the Chargers overall are a much better team than the Falcons right now. Up next, we have the Steelers and the Bengals. The Steelers, a Thursday night loss last week to the Browns on the road in a game where it felt nostalgic to a lot of people, as it was a classic snow game. And it was 100% a trap game for the Steelers, regardless of the weather conditions. And the Steelers could not overcome that. And now they go on the road to take on a Bengals team who is off their bye week. Their season is on the line at this point. And the last time we saw the Bengals against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football a couple weeks ago, the Bengals, they were down and out. But then we saw the Bengals rally. 2 touchdown plays on 4th down. They rallied to tie the game, but then 2 missed field goals by Evan McPherson. And it was ultimately the difference in the game for the Bengals. And the Bengals, they are favored right now for a reason, despite them being a 4-7 team. When you look at the Bengals, you just look at what's gone wrong for the Bengals this season, and things just haven't gone in their favor. But now with them being off their bye week, and they know that their backs are against the wall, this is their season right here. I think the Bengals, I do think that this could be the start of a run if they can win this game. And I think they will win this game because they know their season's on the line. We have seen time and time again that the Bengals, they do show a pulse after a slow start to the season. And I think this is a game where it finally comes together, and the defense, despite allowing the game-winning touchdown a couple weeks ago, we saw some momentum from the defense and some comps going in this game. I am picking the Bengals. Texans and Jaguars. The Texans, they look to respond after being upset by the Titans last week, while the Jaguars, they had their bye week. The last time we saw the Jaguars on the field, they lost 52-6 to the Lions. The good news is for the Jaguars is they do not play a single team above 500 the rest of the way after the Texans this week. The Titans on the road, at home against the Jets, on the road against the Raiders, at home against the Titans, and on the road against the Colts. We have seen the Jaguars have some valiant efforts this season, but have fallen short. The Browns in week 2, the Dolphins in week 1 as well. The Texans earlier in the season when we saw these two teams face off, the Texans, they did not have the game won until the final seconds, a game-winning touchdown pass by C.J. Stroud in the final 20 or so seconds in the game to win the first matchup. I do sense that this is a potential trap game for the Texans, as the Jaguars, they don't really have anything to play for. They are just playing for momentum going into next season. I think the Texans win, but if the Jaguars, if they win this game, I would not be surprised either. I think the Texans, I think they do bounce back from last week, and the Jaguars, they are not yet parting ways with Doug Peterson, which I'm anticipating at season's end that they probably will, but the Texans, I think they bounce back. Cardinals and Vikings. The Cardinals, a loss to the Seahawks on the road last week. The Cardinals continue to be very night and day and very inconsistent. And they go on the road to take on a Vikings team. Off an emotional victory in overtime on the road against the Bears. In a game where the Vikings, they made that game way more difficult than what it needed to be. They allowed the Bears to recover an onside kick and force overtime. But the Vikings defense stepped up when it mattered. They're able to set the offense up with the opportunity to win the game with a game-winning field goal. And I do feel like if I pick the Cardinals to win, then they are going to lose. And if I pick them to lose, then they might win. That's how it's been with the Cardinals for the most part this season. While the Vikings, I have to give them credit. I really did feel like Sam Darnold was going to start to fall under the pressure, but he has not yet. He has stayed calm, he stayed cool and collected, and the Vikings are currently 9-2. The only reason why they aren't a division leader right now is because the Lions are 10-1 in the NFC North. But I am going to go with the Vikings to win. The Cardinals, they continue to be very inconsistent, and I have voiced that throughout the weeks. So we will see what happens here. I will pick the Vikings. I just feel defensively the Vikings are better, and Brian Flores, he has the great scheme, but we've seen the Cardinals pull off upsets we don't see coming before, and it could easily happen again, but I'm personally not going to call for it. I'm going to go with the Vikings. Up next, we have the Colts and the Patriots, and this is a game where I simply have to pick somebody to win. The Colts, a 24-6 loss last week against the Lions, which you can't fault the Colts necessarily for a loss to the Lions, as every team that's played the Lions has lost to them except the Buccaneers. And the Patriots, an abysmal performance last week against the Dolphins. I felt like last week the Patriots, they would have a chance to win that game. I thought they were going to make it close. But overall, abysmal performance by the Patriots. And I genuinely don't know which way to go in this game, as I feel like no matter what I do, whoever I pick is going to end up losing. because that is what seems to happen more often than not when it comes down to having to pick somebody to win. However, this does feel like an ideal game the Patriots would win. I just feel like with how the Patriots looked last week and the Colts going up against the Lions in the beginning of the season, I saw something in around week 6 or 7 where the teams who lost to the Lions, the next game they played, they really struggled and they ended up losing. I don't know if that's actually a direct correlation of it, but I'm going to go with it. Plus, I have picked all favorites so far, so I might as well go with an underdog, I guess, even though earlier in the year we saw all 14 favorites win in a week, but I'll go with the upset here for the sake of going with an upset, and plus I have to pick somebody. Up next, we have the Seahawks and the Jets. The Seahawks now sit atop of the NFC West in an NFC West race that is going to go all the way down to the wire in Week 18 with the way things are playing out right now. And it has been an up and down season for the Seahawks. Started the season 3-0, then they end up losing, if I remember correctly, 5 of their next 6 games, and now they are on a winning streak. And now they go on the road to take on a Jets team that I personally can't trust to win games. The few times this season I have gone with the Jets to win, they have really let me down. And there's just more drama surrounding the Jets organization as they parted ways with their GM last week. There are reports that Aaron Rodgers is skipping out on physicals out of fear that he'll be forced to be sidelined and miss time. And it turns out Aaron Rodgers, he supposedly does want to play for the Jets next season, even though this season has been really underwhelming for him. And with the way things have been playing out, it appears that Robert Saleh wasn't the complete problem. And I personally do think that Robert Saleh is going to be a defensive coordinator somewhere next season. I'll be surprised if he's not. But the fact I can't trust the Jets to win a game, because the few times I've picked them this season, they have let me down, I am going to go with the Seahawks. And it honestly would be typical of the Jets to win this game, but I'm not picking them to do so. I'm going with the Seahawks, who have momentum and confidence on a winning streak right now in what's an up and down season for them throughout the year, but I'm picking them to win this week. Up next, we have the Titans and the Commanders. Both teams had very emotional games last week. The Titans with an upset win on the road against the Texans in a game where I anticipated the Texans would not cover, but I thought they would still win. But the Titans pulling off the upset, and it was the game that we finally saw the Titans offense produce enough points to win a game, as that has been the Titans' problem throughout the entire season, is the defense plays well for the most part, but their offense just can't produce enough points to win games. And now they go on the road to take on a Commanders team off an emotional loss against the Cowboys at home. In a game of the Commanders, they could have forced overtime. Jaden Daniels throwing an 80-plus yard touchdown to Terry McLaurin, but the extra point was missed by kicker Austin Seibert, and the Commanders, they ultimately lost the game. But the missed point after, it was really not a necessarily on the kicker. It was just a really bad hold by the holder. It was a pretty bad snap, and not much you can do about it. But the story for the Titans once again is, can the offense produce enough points to win? I feel like I could trust their defense to stay in the game for the most part, but there's been some moments this season where they couldn't. And part of it is because their offense just isn't productive enough and the defense is exhausted. But I'm going to go with the Commanders to respond to last week's defeat. However, if the Titans won, I would not be surprised as any given Sunday, but I will pick the Commanders. Buccaneers and Panthers. The Buccaneers with a dominant win on the road last week against the Giants, while the Panthers, despite the loss to the Chiefs, it was a big morale victory for them as they went toe-to-toe with the two-time defending Super Bowl champions. And I do think if the last three games have shown anything, I think that if the Panthers are patient with Bryce Young, they're patient with head coach Dave Canales, I think that the Panthers, they have a bright future ahead of them. And Bryce Young has shown in the last three games that he has potential in this league. The question is, are the Panthers going to stick with him or are they going to give up on him? I mentioned weeks ago that Dave Canales needs to have time. And seeing the game last week, I think it showed that if they can just get Bryce Young some support, get him some help, the Panthers, they could be playoff contenders sooner than we expect. But this week, I am ultimately going to go with the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, they were dominant last week against the Giants, which maybe it doesn't mean much because it is the Giants and they were pretty much on third string quarterback Tommy DeVito. But I think the Buccaneers, they do win this game and they will close in on the lead of the NFC South as the NFC South is just being surrendered by the Falcons week in and week out, every week that goes by. The Buccaneers, I think they get the win. But we will see if this week is another morale victory for the Panthers. I look forward to seeing what the Panthers do this week. Up next, we have the Rams and the Saints. The Rams in the very competitive NFC West. They have lost two of their last three games, while the Saints, they had their bye week last week. Going into it, they were on a 2-game winning streak after being on a 7-game losing streak after starting the season 2-0. I anticipate a matchup that will be heavily decided by the running game, as both defenses, they cannot stop the run well at all. The Saints give up an average of 134.2 rushing yards per game, while the Rams, they give up an average of 144.3 rushing yards per game. I really spent longer deciding on this matchup than I really wanted to, because this does feel like a trap game for the Rams, as they are favored in this matchup by 2.5 points the last time I looked. I really wanted to go for the upset and pick the Saints because this feels like the type of game the Saints would win. A Rams team that it looked like they were getting things figured out, but then losing two of the last three games. The Rams defense allowing a career high from Saquon Barkley last week. I do think they bounce back in this game and they do get the win, but this game was a serious coin flip for me until now. Without a doubt, the game of the week, Eagles and Ravens, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, first and second in the NFL in rushing yards. Both teams are first and second in the NFL in rushing offense. And both teams, they stop the run really well. The Ravens second in the NFL in run defense, only giving up 77.9 rushing yards per game, while the Eagles, they are seventh in the NFL in rushing defense, only giving up an average of 99.2 rushing yards per game. The difference for me in this matchup, The Eagles, ever since their bye week, they have done nothing but win. And I do still feel like some people aren't respecting the Eagles enough. I feel like at this point in time, the Eagles are second in command as far as favorites to win the NFC, only behind the Lions. While the Ravens, yes, they are still one of the best teams in the AFC, but there has been some points this season where the Ravens, they have just looked sluggish in games, where they have struggled. The difference for me in this game is the Eagles, they lead the NFL in total defense, while the Ravens, they are 31st in pass defense. Without a doubt, both running backs are going to have good performances. However, the Ravens' pass defense, I think, is going to be a detriment for them in this game. And we will see if Devontae Smith does play for the Eagles in this game, as he did miss last week's game with an injury. But we have seen the Eagles throughout these last few weeks of them still winning games while overcoming injuries. And I'm going to pick the Eagles in what is the best game of the week. Sunday Night Football, 49ers and Bills. Earlier in the season, this was a really highly anticipated matchup, and now that isn't really the case. The injuries the 49ers are dealing with, it is a detriment to the 49ers. As now Brock Purdy is out, Nick Bosa is out, while the Bills, they are on a winning streak right now. They lost to the Ravens and Texans back to back, but they have won every game ever since. And they're off their bye week. Going into it, they went into it with a lot of confidence with a win over the Chiefs, which was really much needed for them given the history of the Chiefs ending their season. And with a short-staffed 49ers team and a Bills team that, yes, they are dealing with injuries of their own, I just feel like the Bills are just the much better team going into this game, while the 49ers, it has been a really disappointing year for them that has been riddled with injuries, but the 49ers, they could have a better record than what their record shows. I think the Bills, they keep on rolling, and Josh Allen has a big-time performance on Sunday night that I feel like should propel him into league MVP favorite, even though to me, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, they have been something else for running backs this season, but the Bills win. Week 13 concludes with Monday Night Football, Browns and Broncos. The Browns with an upset victory over the Steelers on Thursday Night Football. Very emotional win for the Browns to be off of, going on the road at Mile High to take on a Broncos team that has been absolutely rolling. Bo Nix, he has been playing clean football ever since September. He has been making so much progress week after week. And I did feel like the Rookie of the Year race was decided. But Bo Nix, I do think he has been closing in on Jaden Daniels in these last couple of weeks. While I do like to tend to favor the teams who did play on Thursday the week prior, because they do have the few extra days of rest for recovery and to get re-energized. I just think this Broncos team is just looking too good to pick against, and the last time I picked against the Broncos, it went really horribly wrong, and I am trying to avoid that, but I will admire the passion Jameis Winston is having, that he is putting himself out there for a Browns team that is 3-8 on the season, for a team that refused to start him until Deshaun Watson injured his Achilles to rule him out for the season. While I do admire that from Jameis Winston, the Broncos are just looking too good for me to pick against them, which could be a good or a bad thing. I will take the Broncos. And that will do it for my Week 13 NFL predictions. Comment your predictions down below. My Week 12 NFL takeaways, they will be up later this week on YouTube Shorts. Enjoy all the football this weekend. Have a great Thanksgiving. Until next time, Vegas is always watching.